There are many voices in the community.
Some are black. Some are blue.
This is blackandbluevoices.com.
Welcome back to another episode of Black and Blue Voices. I am your host, Brandon Bridges. To my left, I've got the greatest chief since Sitting Bull, Chief D. Giuseppe.
I've never been introduced like that. The greatest chief since Sitting Bull. I'm not.
Wow.
I think that's okay. I don't know.
Now you can cancel me for it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. And to my right, the always great Eric Alexander. How you doing this morning?
Good. Glad to be here.
Drinking that water.
I'll try not to be offended by the introduction not being as good as Chris's.
Right.
I'll come up with something better for you next time.
Exactly.
And then, our man behind the screen, our guru, our genius, Mike Wilkerson.
I am here this morning and on time. I know you're shocked.
We're all here, and that's all that matters.
Mike lives here. I mean, that's why.
Well, we are back again with another episode of Black and Blue Voices. If you didn't check our previous episodes, please check out blackandbluevoices.com. Really great way to catch up on some of the topics we've talked on, some more controversial than others, but a great way to get to understand what this podcast is about and all of these great members here. So I want to just dive right into it. As we sit here and we are representing ourselves, right? We were speaking for ourselves, for our communities, for our professions. You often hear about misrepresentation, right? And I know that within, chief within the police force, I think it would be pretty fair to say there's some bad apples that misrepresent.
Yeah, absolutely. We have there's bad actors in everything, and that, we're no different. It's when you get somebody who's a bad actor in law enforcement, you get somebody that's, that just doesn't have the ethical values to do the job. I can tell you that the others in law enforcement, we absolutely, we can't have them in our profession. And others in law enforcement will stand up and tell you that it just, it misrepresents us. It, makes us look bad. It degrades from our mission and things like that, and that's not saying that there aren't people. There are people that go out. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody goes out and they can make a mistake, but it's more of a lifestyle, right? If you just don't have the ethical values that are correct for our profession, you can't be in that. And I don't know if that's that way for every profession, but in law enforcement, because of the the position that you're in, the amount of authority that you have, the amount of power that you have, you have to have those ethical values in order to complete the mission and do what you're supposed to do.
Absolutely. Well, and actually, I think there's a lot of similarities. Eric Alexander, I can speak for myself. I would assume you've maybe had this thought of, you see something on TV, on Facebook, on social media, whatever it might be, and you're like, damn, oh, that's not a good look, right? A young black kid, older black, whatever it may be, right? A misrepresentation of our community, where you kind of go, that's where they're saying that stuff there, because look at this fool on TV. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think from the community standpoint, there are two things that make me kind of close my eyes and grit my teeth a little bit. One is people in the community, but I give folks in the community a lot of grace because not everybody's educated about how policing works. The political jockeying behind the scenes, etc. So I give ordinary folks a lot of grace. What I can't tolerate is politicians who, what I believe is happening is they're commoditizing, oftentimes suffering, for political gain, right? And they use it as a platform. And when we did the Cops and Robbers Talk podcast a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the Daniel Penny case and how some politicians sort of commoditized the victim's death, and it was a high profile opportunity to go to the funeral and, denounce vigilantism as they saw it. And I have my questions about whether those people really actually care about the victim or they're just using it as an opportunity to build political capital with the Black community. And I feel like the Black community is commoditized by politicians in that way often. So that's something I can't deal with. I can't abide because it's intentional.
So I think my question would be, what's the middle ground, right? You know, as I sit here, you know, I like to play man in the middle. I completely agree with you. I want to let you know that. I also see that we also commoditize some of our own suffering, right?
Sure.
You look at some of the artistic content that comes out, right? That's why you have, I'm going to say this, I hope I don't get canceled. You have a white kid in Maine who's trying to act like Kodak Black, right? I mean, that's where you can see that perpetuation of that stereotype of what that value is.
Yeah.
I guess my question to you both, and then I love to hear you guys kind of discuss it, you know, what's the middle ground, right? Because as an officer, if you're seeing, you know, we talked, I think our last episode, you mentioned, hey, if I'm seeing the same thing from the same people, you're going to have implicit bias. We're humans. There's no way. But on the same token, if you see 3 cops on social media do something bad, that implicit bias, you know, it goes into the civilian side as well. So what is the middle ground here?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to where the good is not highlighted. No matter what if you're talking about community or you're talking about policing, and you know, you know, as many times as when you know, we see, you know, a suspect that comes out in the media or social media or whatnot, you know, some crime that's committed, so on and so forth. You know, what's not talked about because it's not media newsworthy and all that is the people in the community that are stepping up, that are trying to solve crime, that are trying to help, you know, work with their police department, and so on and so forth. But it's the same thing with law enforcement too. You're going to see some of these bad actors, right? I mean, you know, when we looked at the George Floyd incident, I mean, that was all over the media and all that, and that was wrong. That was bad. That was a crime. People went to jail, and they should have. But you know, it's, you know, there's a picture that hangs in one of the police departments, and it has a caption that says, here's the, you know, 3 million encounters that the police had last year where nothing went wrong. You'll never hear about this, so on and so forth. It's the same with the community too, though. Here's the millions of times that you won't see community members stepping up, working with the police. And I got to tell you, there's this, sometimes I think that there's this false narrative that's painted where they say that, or they try to paint it to like there's this division between, you know, the Black community, the African American community, and the police, and the Black community doesn't want to cooperate with the police, or they don't want policing, or they don't want to lower crime or whatever. And that's just simply not true. It's just simply not true. And that's why we have, you know, blackandbluevoices.com, right? We're putting on this show to try to dispel some of those myths, those false narratives. And, you know, we can all recognize, and I can tell you, if we brought people in from other communities where they'll go, yeah, those are bad actors. I know that they say that they're with our group, but they're not. They're misrepresenting us.
There's something I wanted to talk about that Eric brought up that I think is really something to think about, is the commoditization of not only being a minority or someone outside what is considered the majority, but also that commodityism is made into a stack of cash that is made of a stack of cash of victim cards. Something that I'll bring in from another minority community, which is the deaf and hard of hearing community, which I'm deeply familiar with, is that it is far easier for any one of them to grab off the stack of the giant victim card deck and start slapping those down next to each other like they're playing solitaire, because it almost becomes a fence for them to stand behind and scream from, and it's almost a defense. And I think that same thing happens inside of the Black community, the Native American community, every community that there is, mostly because it's easy, especially if you're not the one generating the cards. If all you have in front of you is a stack of victim cards that you can erect and make whatever you want out of them, why would you not grab them and do whatever you want to get what you know you can, because you've seen other people do?
Well, and it's like Eric said too, focusing on, you know, focusing, somebody dies, it's tragic.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, focusing on, you know, the victim, the person who died, or is your motivations for self gain, for some type of platform, for some, and I think that we run into that on, you know, on all fronts. I mean, people are out, you know, look, I've seen people out on social media putting something out just to generate views and likes and self-promote, and to do what? Just like Mike Wilkerson said, to make money. So we run into a lot of that, and there's a lot of societal pressure to do that.
I think it's a little bit more foundational than that, though, because it's not just to generate money; it's to generate benefit for themselves.
Right.
Whatever that's going to be. The sample is any one of the number of different plane mishaps that have happened over the course of the last 3 weeks.
Right.
There's a reason that the videos of what can and has been captured have been on the internet. And it's not because everybody's being kindly, because they want more research to be done on, so that doesn't happen again with another plane mishap.
Mhm.
That's not why they're putting it on the internet. They're putting it on the internet because it can generate lots and lots and lots of traffic.
15 minutes of fame.
Right. It's the instant satiation bit that, because it works for other people, and you can literally point at any one of your friends that might have accidentally fallen into the happenstance of, holy cow, I'm now famous for 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Well, they're going to do it the
human
next
draw
time it
toward
does
that.
too.
There is.
Absolutely.
Draw
There
toward
is.
that.
Well, let's be
There
honest, trauma sells, right?
Yeah.
Trauma
If it
sells.
bleeds,
Yeah.
it leads.
Yeah.
All that.
Yes.
So with that being said, right, and I think this has started a really great dialogue. I think part of that is because that is what sells, right? You talked about commoditization, you know, people with poo shiesties on now going everywhere, right? Kids pretending to shoot someone after scoring a touchdown. I mean, that is the culture that we're setting, whether you're white, black, green, blue, everywhere in between. Right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the culture we're setting. So my question is then, and Eric Alexander, I'd like to hear from you. What do you do when you're in a group and they do something and you're like, hey, this doesn't represent me. Hey, this isn't us. This isn't me. Whether it be one person in the group, 10 people out of 20, or the whole group but you. An example, I'll let you go, but the example I think about is when those riots were going down, you didn't see all the protesters who were stopping people from looting, right? All you saw on the internet was 95% of the people loot, whatever it may be, right? But you didn't really see those people who would stand in front of those shops and say, hey, this isn't us. This isn't what we represent.
Right.
So, Eric Alexander, I'd like to kind of get your thoughts on how you navigate that.
Well, first, I want to address something that I think we're all sort of talking around, and it's this idea that any one group is monolithic.
Okay.
Right. So not all cops are anything, not all black people are anything.
Right.
And I think one of the things that we're kind of focusing on in this episode is, I don't think you can ever get rid of bad actors in any group, because people are people.
Yeah.
But I think what we're pushing back against is the idea of over-indexing on the negative aspects or negative elements in a group, bad actors in a group, right? Whether that's folks in the deaf and hard of hearing population, black people, cops, people in the military, healthcare workers, you know, pick a group. You're always going to have people. But to Chris, something Chris said earlier stood out to me, which is you don't see the other side of it, because what you just said, if it bleeds, it leads, right? So humans have a negativity bias. This is known. It's a survival instinct. It served us for 200,000 years. We focus on the negative things because that's the thing that we have to avoid to survive if we're a caveman, right? And society has evolved so fast, our brains haven't caught up.
Yeah.
It's evolving faster than the human psyche can adapt. So I think that's number one. If I'm in a situation where, I'll give you an example. Bunch of people sitting around talking about Mike Brown. Bunch of black people sitting around talking about Mike Brown. And I've been in this situation. And there's a lot of misinformation, misconceptions out there. I've been fortunate to have like seen some of the evidence presented and how the investigation was done. And a lot of that stuff's just not true, right? So my approach to everything is start with what is demonstrably true.
Yes.
Don't tell me, show me. Don't tell me that something is true. You need to show me if we're having a serious conversation about a big issue like this, I start with what is true.
Mm-hmm.
To the best I can. And I the word demonstrably is important because absolute truth is elusive, right? We never really know. Somebody can always be lying. Somebody can always be covering something, whatever. And people get too deep into that. The absence of information is not information, right?
Yes.
So if you say everybody's lying, then, or it's a conspiracy or whatever, then you're admitting you don't know anything. So you cannot then conclude something different.
Mm-hmm.
So I start with what's true, and I'm usually the person, and I don't address the group. I will provide information. That's how I do it. Well, that's not actually true. For example, one of the things is that Mike Brown was 7 million feet away, was shot from a distance in the back or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, the evidence doesn't suggest that. The evidence suggests that he was shot at close range. He had gun residue on his hand because he grabbed the officer's firearm. This all occurred in the car. His blood is on the car. So that all doesn't lend itself to the argument that he was far away, right? And I try not to have an emotional position on things as much as possible. This stuff is emotional. I'm a human being, contrary to what a lot of people would say. My wife would tell you I'm a cyborg, but I want to start with, rather than come to a conclusion and look for facts to justify it, which is what feels like too many people in America are doing right now. Start with the information and draw your conclusion.
Right. And it's hard to get that information. I mean, a lot of times when we talk about these cases, and that's what I say, because I'll have people that'll contact me and go, well, what's your thoughts on that? And I always say, I got to see everything. I would have to see everything. And
we've talked about this several times. In particular, the last time I remember was with Larry. We talked about that in a Cops and Robbers Talk episode.
Right.
And what you talked about was essentially the OJ system, or the OJ sample.
Right.
Where you have, was OJ guilty or not? The answer is,
you must acquit.
And the answer is, though, is that let me see all of the evidence.
Right.
And I will make up my summation of whether or not he was guilty. The problem is that is not easy.
It's not. But
hold on. What I also love of what Eric said was that the truth is also definitively not easy, because very often the truth also requires you to admit that you too are wrong. Yep. And if you have to admit you're wrong, then you can't possibly convince someone else of something else you're trying to tell them to convince them about.
Right.
Which is not accurate either.
Right.
But that whole easy thing is why wide paintbrushes are used. Because if I have a wall that's 10 feet by 8 feet, the fastest way to paint that, give me that massive brush over there quick.
Right.
Great. I'll get this shit taken care of in a couple of minutes.
Right.
Boom, done.
Right.
That's what we're talking about.
Can I give you a stupid example?
Yeah.
Frivolous example. I'm a Chiefs fan, and I'm looking at Brandon. I'm looking at Brandon in his Bears hat.
Go Eagles.
Hey, stop.
Go Eagles.
Stop. Don't, not this weekend.
I will not be attacked, so I'm not going to weigh in here at all.
Yeah. So I'm a Chiefs fan. I've been a Chiefs fan since the 80s, unlike a lot of these people run around who are fair weather Chiefs fans. But so one of the angriest I've ever been at my football team was when they traded up to draft a spread quarterback out of Texas Tech. And my daughter used to dance, and we were at a dance recital, and we're walking around somewhere, Branson or something. And I'm following the draft on my phone, and I'm cussing. I'm walking around cussing. I'm mad, right? Because we spread quarterbacks don't win the Super Bowl, blah, 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 right? That's the wrongest I've ever been in my entire life, because Patrick Mahomes is Michael Jordan in football, right? Mm-hmm. And so to Mike's point, I have to be able to say, and this is a frivolous example, but I think it's emblematic of what we're talking about.
It's exactly what we're talking about.
I have to say, that's the wrongest I have ever been. I whiffed. I whiffed. And then they sat Alex Smith down and eventually traded him. And my man has never in 8 years not been to the AFC Championship game. Ever. It's crazy. This is the best start to a career that anybody in football has ever had. And I was wrong. And I have to be able to admit, now this is a frivolous example. Now, when it's something existential like police shootings or something else societal, it's much more difficult. But
see, I disagree though. Well, it's not only is it a perfect sample, it's not extraneous at all. The reason is because you have met Chiefs fans, and I'm a Chiefs fan because I happen to live in Missouri, I guess.
Yep.
But you've met Chiefs fans. They will beat you to death.
Yeah, Chiefs fans aren't always nice.
And so that's what I'm saying is that
Well,
for some people, it really is that big a deal.
well, and I think something you guys have touched on, and Chief, I want to ask you a question because I think this
Sure.
goes right up your alley. A lot of truth is perception, right? So let's say that Patrick
Absolutely.
Mahomes hadn't been to 8 straight. He'd only been to 3. Say he'd only won 1. So
Right.
yeah, there's a lot right there that
Right.
it's not as concrete factually. And I think that when we go back to policing, talk about the Black community, within both communities, perception's truth.
Right.
And I think there is a
Right.
perception of each community
Right.
that of that code of silence. I think we brushed on that last time, right? So
Yeah.
how do you operate in a world where or in a stance where you're perceived to already be lying
You know,
before you even say anything?
Leadership needs to step up and recognize that and say that. Leadership of whatever, community leadership of policing or whatever group, you need to step up and you need to recognize that perception is everything, because I can tell when perception's going down the road and I'm like, what, you guys are off base. You don't have all the facts here. Just like Mike was commenting, you know, I've not seen everything a grand jury sees, right? A grand jury comes out and everybody's like, and everything, and you know, everybody's like, oh my gosh, how did they get? I haven't seen everything that they see.
You will not ever
No,
see everything they see because you're not in the room.
You're not in the room, and you didn't see like 70 witnesses that they interviewed. You didn't see everything.
And the discussion of each of those 70 witnesses. That's what I'm saying.
Now, with that said, I have seen things go through the criminal justice system, through the court system, and things like that have turned out that have actually absolutely been wrong. Right? I mean, it's not perfect. There are human beings that run it. They're not perfect. But like, how many times have you guys ever seen a case where a suspect, an African American suspect, is confronted by the police, and they give up and they say, "Hey, man, I'm not going to do anything to make you shoot me, hurt me, so on and so forth." And the police officer say, "Hey, I sure appreciate that. Thank you, absolutely. I'm just doing my job." And the suspect said, "I understand this thing." How many videos of that have you seen?
I can't really think of any.
I have to be honest.
It's not sexy web content.
I have seen a lot of them, and I watch a lot of badge cam.
You've
videos.
seen a lot because you're probably affiliated with us.
No.
Because
the sample is when I'm, and I'm certain everybody else has something that they have listening to, or they have something going on behind their shoulder when they're working.
Yeah.
Typically, when I'm working, I'll throw that on because that banter between someone who's in crisis and law enforcement trying to intervene.
And that's my point. That's why you're seeing that.
Yeah.
That's why the majority is not seeing that. I've seen that too. I've seen it firsthand. And
well, what it's not is a 17-year-old drunken girl kicking a police officer in the face, which is what gets all the traffic and everybody shares that
Sexy web content.
Well, but let's talk about even deeper though, right? And
but I want to.
Oh, but please.
No, I was go back to your point too. You asked about the code of silence. So that's been a term and a perception of police will cover up with no limits for another police officer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's kind of how it's been defined or whatnot.
Perception.
And look, I'm not going to, I've been in policing for 34 years. I've not been in policing for 134 years. Right. So I can't tell you. No, I haven't. Believe it or not. I might be a year. It might be a year or two older than you, but that's about it. But you know, look, I can't tell you because people go, well, you know, back in 1917, I'm like, don't ask me. I don't know. But I can tell you modern day, when we talk about the code of silence, and it's based on my experiences, there's not a code of silence that I've seen to where somebody's going to go, you know, hey, Eric, you're another cop. Hey, I know you did that murder. And we just won't say anything about that. That doesn't happen. That is not accurate. Now, if Eric gets pulled over on a traffic stop, it's my experiences, and he's a police officer, will he get extended professional courtesy? I'll be transparent. Probably. Yeah, maybe. Depends on what he's doing. Now, if he's doing 130 miles an hour down the highway drunk,
0.38.
No, Eric's probably going to jail.
We see those in the hospital.
And the reason I know this is because I've known law enforcement agencies who have arrested other police officers and taken them to jail on things. I mean, you don't get a pass, with certain things. So there is professional courtesy, and just like, you're in a certain profession and you want to help other people in your profession, and you go, hey, let me coach you, let me mentor you, let me help you out. There's that in law enforcement. I won't deny that. I'll be completely transparent about it. But
It's that in every profession.
but when we talk about a code of silence,
I'm going to go deeper than code of silence, because if we flip it around and throw it back at,
that's actually where I was about to go here.
The context is ... snitches get stitches.
But is that just the Black community though?
There's no one in the deaf community saying, woo, if you lie, I'm going to beat your ass.
No, but I know a lot of white people who also, just being that man in the middle, right? And this is actually, Chief, what I was going to say to you is that I know, Eric, growing up, you were probably taught the same thing as Mike just said, right? Snitches get stitches. I've said that to my kids before, right? Just not necessarily holistically, but hey, stop tattling on your sister, stop tattling on your brother, things like that.
That's a societal.
But is that different? Is that different from a code of silence, though? I mean, because it's
another flavor. It's another flavor of code of silence ice cream.
Because I think that there's different levels of that. I mean, you're going to say that, and I understand. You know what? I know people who've policed in minority communities and impoverished areas where crime is very high, and people will say, hey, I really don't want to get involved in that because I don't want the repercussions and all that. But I got to tell you guys, even in the areas that aren't minority communities and the areas that aren't impoverished communities, I have people that will go, I don't want to get involved in that. I don't want to be exposed on social media. Right.
So this is the question that I want to ask both everyone in the room and at home listening, honestly, right? We just said perception's truth, right?
Right.
For a lot of people, whether it's the absolute truth, all of that's up for debate, but perception's truth. And I think there is a perception that just within the Black community, right? If you snitch, then, hey, you better not walk down the street. Don't let me see you. I don't want to get involved.
Yeah. Is that real?
Yeah, that is real. But I also think there's a perception that within the law enforcement community of, beyond that professional courtesy, if you turn in certain officers, you will be shunned by the department. No one will ride with you.
Be ostracized because you've come in and yeah, I'll say yeah. I mean, I think there's some of that, absolutely. But I think that you have different personalities and such. I mean, I have seen officers stand up and go, "That's wrong." It depends on the culture that you foster. If you foster a culture of from the top, if you foster a culture of that's not tolerated in your family, if your father and mother go, hey, I know Eric's over there doing that, but we don't do that in our family. Mm-hmm. I know that you're looking at that example. We don't do that. That fosters that environment. And what happens is the people that are in that group go, hey, we don't do that. And I've got 6 other people here that are going to back me up on that. Yeah. It depends on how you set the tone.
I have 2 things. The first one is code of silence in every community. Totally true. That is 100% across the board, giant wide paintbrush. But we can all paint with it because we all know that it is a truth.
There's a truth.
Whatever it's going to be called, it's all there.
And it goes back to not being monolithic.
Correct. Right.
Everybody's not the same.
Right. The second thing is that your sample of don't tattle on your sister, ... or you're going to get stitches.
Well, I would say it like that. But you
see what I'm saying? Yeah. The reason you're telling them not to tattle on your sister is because it's not nice. Or worse yet, if you're tattling on your sister because it was your fault, that's totally justified. That's parenting.
Well, and interestingly enough,
but if you tell the truth, I'm going to beat your ass or commit an act of violence against you.
Right.
That's not going to work.
Well, and actually the reason that I do tell my kids that is that kind of something Chief touched on here is I don't want them putting themselves in situations they don't need to be in. Right. So it's more of a lesson as you get older of, hey, there are times that might be best for you to walk the other way, let other people handle what's going on. Right. And that's a survival thing, as we touched on before, right? Yeah. Survival. Eric Alexander, like to hear your thoughts. I mean,
so
you're
many
black,
thoughts.
I'm black, we're all black.
I have so many thoughts. First of all, I want to start with something that you've said a couple times, which is perception is reality, and that's a colloquialism, and I think we need to stop that.
Really?
We need to stop thinking that, because perception is not reality. Perception is our perception of reality, and a lot of times
is reality.
but it's not. If
that's
it's based on
that's
nothing,
a reality.
It's their reality. I agree.
It is
That goes
their
back
reality.
to the O.J. Simpson case. Again, the sample is you
Correct.
can have whatever opinion you want of O.J.,
Sure.
whether he was guilty or not. But until all of us go and we grab the giant stacks and rooms filled with evidence, and you read through them all, and you get to the end of it where there's page one, whatever bajillion,
Right?
You don't actually know what the perception is.
Right.
Well, there's
But
a reason a
perception-
defense attorney and a prosecutor have different expert witnesses, right? Who will testify on the same set of facts, but with a different conclusion.
Correct.
So that perception drives that reality.
But I think one of the problems that we have is we're too accepting of perception as reality, because there are
Without evidence and proof.
without evidence, perception is reality. And it goes back to the conversation we just had about taking in new information, and people want to confirm their priors, right? Even in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. We see it all over the place, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I think I say this when I talk to people in my personal life and professional life, and I advise the listeners here, allow your perception. We've talked, and I've had perceptions, and I'm like, I know that's not fair.
Sure, and that's okay.
Right?
Express it. Let's talk about it. Right.
There's a sweet spot between rejecting your initial reactions to stuff and allowing yourself to wait and change your mind with more information. I feel like there's some nuance in there that I just want to call that out.
Yes.
I just want to call that out.
The best sample of what I think Eric is talking about is when somebody says, well, it is what it is. No, it's not.
Well, but
that kind of statement just drives me up a wall.
Yeah, just
I think
nothing.
I think though what Eric's saying is perception is reality, but it's not necessarily truth. And
that's a better way of saying.
And there is a lot more things that have to be invested to find the truth than there is to find your perception. Because I can make my perception really quickly. I mean, right off the bat, my emotions are going to form my perception.
Sure.
And
it's true for all of us.
Right. It's true for all of us. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm going to be defensive on certain things right off the bat. That is my knee-jerk reaction. And I know I'm going to do it. And then if I can step back and he can go, hold on a minute. Did you know this? Oh no, I didn't know that. Let me log that into the evidence. The evidence
and we
page,
do that for each other all the time. But I also want to go back to something that you talked about, which was this idea that culture of an organization, and let's call out the big difference between any community and society and police, right? The difference is police is an organization with a budget and training and hierarchy and all these things that you don't have in a community. So this idea that snitches get stitches is not unique to the Black community, but I think it's common in any community that struggles economically, has problems with crime, and has criminal elements in their community. Those people live, regardless of what they look like, they live in fear of those people.
Sure. Right.
And the overwhelming majority of, and I think this is demonstrable, Chief, you keep me honest, but the overwhelming majority of the people inside of that community want policing. Right.
Sure,
it goes back to the defund the police thing,
right,
which was the dumbest name anybody could come up with for anything, because there's a whole defund the police is this giant umbrella with a whole bunch of stuff in it that ranges from, let's not send only police to mental health calls, which is a totally reasonable thing, right? Cops don't want to show up to a mental health call that they're not trained to deal with, right?
We need all the help we can get.
Need
in
all
fact,
the help you can
there
get.
are programs that have counselors that go with police officers.
Yes,
it's very effective.
Police welcome that, right?
Absolutely.
So it ranges from that to get rid of police, which I've said on these airwaves. If you're saying get rid of police, you don't actually care about the Black community.
Well,
or any community that needs policing, because they have a problem with crime.
Needs policing.
And before we expand on that, I'd love to get our listeners' perception.
Absolutely.
I'd like to get their reality, their truth. Please visit blackandbluevoices.com. take a minute, think about, some of the topics we've touched on,
Yep.
and give us your feedback. We'd love to hear from you. And as we start collecting this information and this feedback, we'll probably bring it here to discuss.
Right. Absolutely.
Because it's not just about our voices being heard.
There's always a piece of the episode that I always try to stop everyone to and just contemplate one big question. Have you hit the like button?
Yeah.
Because if you don't hit the like button, we can't continue to be on YouTube, right?
The most important question of our time.
The other
like
thing too
button.
is
Like and subscribe.
Yeah, need to make sure that you're also leaving your commentary down inside the comments over at YouTube. Remember, you can also do the same thing as Brandon said, which is go over to blackandbluevoices.com, click on the contact button, fill in the clip web form, and we'll get you all set.
Yeah, absolutely. Let us know what you want us to talk about, because this is a format that I don't know that everybody does. Trying to bring police, members of the Black community, African American community together, talking about topics. And I've had people, oh my gosh, you're going to do that way? Yeah, why not? We don't have a format where that occurs,
right.
And we want to hear from you. What other topics would you like us to talk about? Yeah. And what other things would you like us to bring up? This is a place where we've said, hey, we can come together, we can have conversations, and we can work through some of these things and be open and transparent.
Yeah.
And I think you said it best, Chief. It's a check your feelings at the door conversation.
You got to do that. Yep.
Yep.
You got to do that.
Right, so now that we've done our shameless plug,
I feel like you asked me a question a long time ago and I didn't answer it.
No, you did, but
Did
I
I?
actually want to kind of tee this one back up to you, though. So everything we've talked about, right? I think we've talked the bad actors in every community are the outliers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you remove those outliers?
Well, see, that's where it's different. I think that Eric was kind of hitting on that. So in police work, we can remove people. I mean, we can, in fact, we have a system I know that we use in our state here in Missouri. It's a licensing system, and if you don't have a license, you can't be a police officer. And like I said, the overwhelming majority of law enforcement officers, when incidents happen, such as the George Floyd incident, things like that makes policing look bad. That's wrong. I can't tell you, and I don't know that this was prevalent, but I can't tell you how many police officers and police organizations were outraged by that, and who publicly spoke out about that. Because,
I caught some of that,
and you guys can comment on how it is with the community, but it was overwhelming to where we had police officers say, no, that was wrong. That doesn't represent us, and a call to try to remedy that. But like in Missouri, if you have somebody who's a bad actor, there's a licensing process. And if that license isn't there, then you're not a police officer. We're trying to continually improve that. There's been criticisms, about, well, wait a minute, we got a bad cop here, and then all of a sudden he pops up over here, and all of a sudden pops up over here. Trying to remedy that, right? Yeah. No system is
getting
perfect.
Through to him. See, I'm incepted that thought into his head. It's right in the front of his brain.
You haven't. I've known that.
Scream about this.
I've known that for years. But what you need to know is, I'm not the only one that's saying that. I can bring in other police leaders. They're saying the same thing. How do we stop this from? And we're working through that. We're trying to work through that. But we have a system.
All right. Can I address this? Because I want to have this conversation with you.
Sure.
Because you make a really good point. Like, we don't see the traffic stops that go perfectly smoothly.
Right.
We don't see somebody pulled over, a black person pulled over by a white cop who has warrants, and everybody's like, listen, we don't want any problems here. Nobody wants any problems. It goes perfectly smoothly. Right. The fact that we don't see more law enforcement complaining about bad actors is completely solvable by law enforcement leadership. Is it not?
By complaining about bad actors?
Yeah, make that public. Do that publicly. Because here's the counterexample, I'd say. Did anybody read the coroner's report for George Floyd?
I did not.
The top line, maybe not the top line, but at the top, it was all steered toward the fact they had fentanyl in his system. As if I didn't see a man kneel on his neck for minutes and minutes and minutes until he died. And then if you watch through the video past that point, did anybody render any aid?
Well, no,
Nobody.
and
They rolled him onto a stretcher and threw him
Right.
in the back of an ambulance and drove him to the morgue.
Right.
So, like, the point I'm making here is that it's not just cops, right? Like, we from your perspective, I see how it sounds like, you know, people are saying that cops are saying this or that or the other thing, but it's also a coroner report came out and said and implicated fentanyl in his death. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Well,
but I think you touched on.
But here's the thing with that. if cause of death was due to, and you've got to separate the, you know, the public opinion, the social media from the court proceedings. Okay. And the thing with, you know, if fentanyl was a cause of death or, you know, or whatnot is found in the system, so on and so forth, that doesn't mean that there's not a crime that occurred. That doesn't mean that, you know what I'm saying? And you also have to remember, going back to one of you said this, there's a prosecutor, there's a defense attorney. Yeah. Both sides, I mean, look, both sides are fighting for something, and it's not the same thing.
Correct.
Okay. The system is fighting for justice, whether that's you're not guilty or you're guilty. So, I mean, the system is fighting for, you know, justice, but you have two sides that are fighting for something. So if I've got to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt, you know, I'm on the prosecution side, then I'm going to need, you know, I don't want the defense side is going to go, well, wait a minute, fentanyl was in the system, and you're saying that it was because of this, but it might not be because of this, because fentanyl was in a system. That's going to be a strategy for the defense. The defense has to only prove that you don't have reasonable doubt. The prosecution has to overwhelmingly prove you did it. That crime was committed. You've met all the elements of this crime. So that's what goes, you know, that's what goes into, you know, these reports. And the coroner's report it's a scientific, I don't say fact, but it's a scientific piece of that. So, you know, they put that, you know, they put that in there. As far as, though, the talking points when somebody goes, well, he really died of a fentanyl overdose. Okay, look, I'm saying this from law enforcement. Okay, look, we had a police officer, and I had people going, is that a chokehold? No, that's not a chokehold. You don't kneel on somebody's neck. You don't do that. You know, there's people going, well, wasn't it in their policy? I have no idea. If it was in their policy, it was a bad policy. I doubt it, you know, but that's a crime. And the reason that I've come down on that is obviously somebody went to jail. It was prosecuted. There was evidence, and that's the way that it came out. You're still going to have that public argument that says, well, wait a minute. He died of fentanyl overdose, not kneeling on his neck. That, I'm like, it's a silly argument. If that were the case, that prosecutor, you know, would not have probably been able to make that case and prove beyond a reasonable doubt that a homicide, an unjustified homicide occurred. Well, and that's what happened.
And, you know, we live in a 30-second society, right? Everything is a social media clip, 30-second.
And that's what Eric's trying to say. Hold on.
So
look at all the evidence.
But how do we change the perception? And I'll be honest, I have a perception, whether it's true or not, that police unions, organizations protect officers for the most part, regardless. Is that true or not? I'm not saying it is, but there's a perception that I know is shared.
You have to separate. And this is what's difficult. This is what I was trying to make with the George Floyd case. If you're talking about socially, we're going to go and we're going to protect bad behavior. I have seen where, just like in the George Floyd case, law enforcement is outraged. I've seen that where they go, that does not represent us. That's wrong. I've seen, you know, people, officers say, get out of our profession if you're doing that. But you have to separate that. If you're talking about somebody gets charged with a crime or charged with an allegation, and there's a defense that goes into that. Yes, of course, that defense is going to go fight to even if the behavior is wrong, if there was, they were, they were a police officer, they committed a crime, there's a defense that's going to go to court and try to defend them. But they do that with everybody that goes to court who's accused of a crime. So when you say the police union provides an attorney or whatnot, they're defending them, internally within the department. That's their duty. And and when me and a defense attorney get into the same room, it's not that we're arch enemies. I am not out to put somebody in jail who hasn't committed a crime. But sometimes the perception is, or you kind of buy into that, hey, we're on this side and everybody who commits a crime is on this side. Well, wait a minute. If they hadn't committed the crime, I need to try to prove them innocent just as much as I need to try to prove them guilty. So it's a more complex answer than just, police unions or police officer groups or police associations or police leadership associations are trying to protect their members at all costs. Because I can tell you, I've been in these associations where we've said, oh no, you need to go. We're not tolerating that. You need to go. And more of that needs to happen. There are some organizations that maybe stand up and they shouldn't, but the people that I know that I've worked with have been ethical.
Why
I'll say the same thing.
Why isn't that more? Why aren't people in law enforcement more organized and vocal about that?
Because it's sexy.
Well, not just that.
Depends on who you're talking to.
Because
it's not sexy, and it also generates exactly what we're talking about, which is the negative impact of fracture is what we get focused on rather than the reason for the fracture.
Well, and it's not just that. You think of it like this. If you're under the microscope all the time, what your goal, and this is where you get pushed. I mean, like people will go, why are you on this podcast? Right? If you're under the microscope all the time, you're going to try to make your footprint as small as possible. You don't want to be seen. You don't want to be heard. Because everything you say and do is going to be criticized, right? And that's whether that's reality or that's perception. I can tell you that is perception. And that's been that way for years in policing. Hey, don't go there. No, don't. What are you crazy? You're going to go on a podcast?
I get you, but what's the alternative? What? So it begs the question, what can you do that will get you not scrutinized? The answer is nothing.
There's nothing. You're going to get scrutinized. Right. But,
so why not?
But to minimize the scrutiny, I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying to minimize the scrutiny, I don't want to get too vocal and out there. I mean, I've seen leaders step up. I've seen them do it, but I mean, I don't want to get too far off the rails. It's just easier not to engage. And
it's risk analysis.
It's risk analysis. Well, absolutely.
And I get that. And I get, Mike, what you're talking about with fracture. But what we hear, what we see, and one of your complaints earlier, and I agree with it, is we only see the bad stuff.
Right.
But if the bad stuff was balanced out with police leadership, police organizations, God forbid, police unions can't, right? They got to represent their membership. I get it, but come out and say this is totally unacceptable.
Well, and to defend police unions, I've seen police unions come out and say, no, this is wrong, so on and so forth. But
we don't hear it.
But you're right, you don't hear it. But
that's because the news doesn't cover something like that because it's not beneficial,
and we have no access to, or is it not being said enough, or is it not being said enough? I have a hard time thinking that policing, and I hate that term, right? Policing. It's like saying the black community, like it's one thing, but police leadership nationally can't get this out there. I find that so difficult.
Well, and I see a parallel problem even within the black community. So I was watching, it was maybe yesterday, the day before, two young black teenagers steal a car. They go around a corner. They go to run to the building. The people outside the building are shutting the gate to try to keep the cops out. Right. So I know that's a perception. I've seen it pop up at least 4 or 5 times. So I know from an officer's standpoint, right, whether it's an officer who works there, has no idea about the area, whatever it may be, they have the same feelings that we have discussed about, hey, this is a group that seems to be protecting itself, and why don't you want the bad apples out? But even within our own community, I know there's probably perception outward that, hey, we do the same thing, right? How many times has there been a shooting or an incident happen, and we clam up, right? And just same thing as we talked about with whether it be Italian Americans dealing with the mafia or
you don't want to be on the you don't want to be in the news, you don't want to be in the limelight, you don't want to project that. It's the same thing. The community doesn't want, you talk to somebody and go, hey, I need you to fill out a statement, this and that, and they're like, I don't want to get involved. It's the same culture in policing too. Where you're like, a lot of people are like, I'm going to say that, and then somebody's going to do this and this and this and this and this. And we've seen it happen over and over and over again. You say you have one misstep, and then all of a sudden somebody out there is all over you about it.
They've dug up tweets from 25 years ago before Twitter even was invented.
But that's
are perfect.
Right. But that's the nature of the beast for being a police officer, right? Like, and there's, like we said, there's nothing that's going to change that, because people out here looking for clicks, like Mike said, are going to do that regardless.
There are some, this is something that it always keeps popping up and we get kind of sidetracked. Something I want to mention about news services is that there are many news services now that are helping you understand not only what the news currently is, but where the news is coming from.
Yes.
One that I jump in on is ground.news. And ground.news is giving you a series of different items that are inside the news, but they're also tethering to how those articles and those conveyors of the articles actually lean, so that you can have a tether and a broader aspect of how the news is getting there, but more importantly, why and who is trying to help spread that news. We'll have a link inside the description, but also over at the show notes over at blackandbluevoices.com. And I urge everybody, there's another one called, I think it's Straight Arrow. And Straight Arrow News is another service that is trying to help you understand that there's value about looking down the middle and looking over to the sides to understand the color and the perspective of what's going on inside the atmosphere. But to take the middle ground, as opposed to jumping into one of your trenches on either side, so that you can try and understand and have a better perspective of what we're talking about, especially when it comes to news, because news is exactly what I'm talking about for clicks, where there are many and have been many news agencies that do try to go fair.
And
the problem is that they're not around anymore.
Well, and if we take, and that's a great point and a good perspective. If we go back to one of our other podcasts where we talked about painting with a broad brush, and I think that eventually, what we need to do is we need to get somebody from the media on here to get perspective, because I will bet they can sit. I know this. They can sit down. They're going to say the same thing. They're going to say, hey, we're painted with a broad brush. How many times do you hear people bash the media? Right? They bash the media. I know reporters that are ethical, that have values, that are going to report
one of the
truth
things that
try.
I have marveled at since the take-up of the most recent administration, the Trump administration here in 2025, is the re-onset of actual news and press conferences, where it feels like a human news conference. You watch and you can see people engage. You can see people ask questions. Not only that, you can see cogent thought being delivered back in regard to the questions that are being answered, all of which lead to other questions. The other big giant get is that a lot of the previous organizations and outlets that were either previously discarded or banned from being inside the place have now been not only brought back in, but they're opening with wider arms for more legitimate agencies to come in and help convey news. And so again, this whole thing of looking down the middle and then looking at what's going around in the atmosphere, it's not rare. It's something that we've all been doing. It's just whether or not that sells and gets the clicks and gets the traffic so the people can continue. That's the real question mark, but it is out there. You do have to look for it though. It's not something you're going to stumble upon in any stretch, especially with the news.
And that, I think we push it back over. Everybody go to blackandbluevoices.com. Tell us, should we get somebody from the media on to talk about this? Media bias. I want other people in groups that are painted with a broad brush to tell us their experiences too, because what I'm trying to wrap my head around and to conceive is, it's not just, we're talking about the Black community, the policing community. It's a lot of different communities and groups.
Well, and the people listening have a responsibility too. To your point, Mike, you have to be a little bit responsible for your news, right? Like we think of news as something that's pushed to us, but you have to be responsible for your own information and your own information
100%.
sources. So like for me, in order to get to the middle, you have to suspend disbelief or suspend your not rush to judgment. I'll put it that way, right? So you get a piece of information. News is not headlines. I read more news than I watch, because the news is a TV show. And when I watch news, I look at it like, this is a TV show. But there's a responsibility for us to get information before we draw conclusions. If you want to claim to be informed, if you don't, that's on you, right?
But don't you think that those media sources, or there's people in these media organizations that actually want to be heard too and want to go, no. Like we have people in our organization that paint us in a bad light too. And this is what we're trying to do. I'd love to hear from them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if any of our listeners out there are part of the media, or have contacts, again, please send them over.
I've got a bunch of tethers too. And we'll get someone from the media that's not only willing to tell us what's going on, but can tell us what's going on, because those things are not mutually exclusive.
Right.
Finding someone that is not only willing to tell us what's actually going on, but that can come in and tell us what's going on. We're not looking for a unicorn, but we are looking for someone that either doesn't have nearly the presence they used to have, but actually has been in the business. And there are many people that are just riddled along the path of destruction inside of, especially the last 4-year wake, where not only was your voice denied, you were literally, you are hit, the eject button is hit.
Hence why they don't come out. We were just talking about, well, why don't you come out and be more vocal about it, and so on and so forth. Well, good example in this group. If you do, you get ostracized, you get, your career is ruined, so on and so forth. So this happens in a lot of different groups. And I think that's the reason why more people don't step out and take that risk. But no risk, no reward, no gain, no progress.
When I'd like to challenge our listeners, as you walk away from this, check your sources. As you go through your day, as you're reading news, I would challenge you to find varying perspectives of the same news article.
Corroborate
story.
Everything you think you believe. Find it from multiple sources.
Find the middle, right? Find that middle. So that's my challenge to our listeners, and would love to hear your guys' feedback on it. As Mike said, leave a like, a comment, subscribe, go to blackandbluevoices.com. We really want to hear from our listeners. So with that being said, we are going to touch up on our final thoughts before we exit this episode. Chief, I'll let you go first.
I think it's been a good episode, a good talking points. It's things that I wanted to hit on to kind of start having the conversation and opening up the conversation for others to come in to know, hey, look, this is a safe space. We can talk about this. We can get some things out on the table. That I really wanted to point out the similarities to the issues that all of us have, whether it's the Black community, the policing community, or others out there, the stressors that keep us from doing shows like this, and where we can go from here. So I hope this is a platform, a kind of a launching pad to get this out. Again, we want to encourage everybody to go over to blackandbluevoices.com. Give us your comments, feedback. What else should we talk about?
Sir Eric Alexander the Great.
I think echo everything Chief said. And I want to double down on what Mike was talking about, and Brandon, verify your sources, get the right information, because everybody suffers from this, and our brains, this is a human problem. It's not a problem with police or Black community or media. It's everybody, like you said. It's because our brains are trying to make sense of our world, and we do it by making assumptions and using heuristics and and identifying patterns, but those patterns aren't always true. And we live in a really complicated world where truth is not always what we want it to be, and it's not always simple. So we need to slow down, take special care. Don't derive your truth just from YouTube shorts. Right. Whatever you think corroborate it, verify it, and it'll help decrease that painting with a broad brush tendency.
Mr. Mike Wilkerson.
I think one of the things that we kind of missed during our discussion was that it's so easy not only to get instantly emotional, but also to throw things into just instant black holes of unreason. The sample I'll give you is the JFK assassination. We have now for 70 years been wondering what actually happened in Dealey Plaza. Have you guys been to Dealey Plaza, by the way?
Not.
Okay. Well, the shot is a chip shot. I'm not even a rifle shooter, but the shot that was taken was not a difficult shot. Okay.
Right.
Rather than believe that there's one dude that could have possibly shot the president and killed him with a rifle out of a window in an elevated position, there have been and continue to be spun eons of stories and elements that people think are relevant and that we have to be thinking of because they spin into the black hole of we don't actually know. Instead of doing exactly what Eric's talking about, which is looking at the not only collected evidence, but the exhaustive collective evidence, especially in that case. We have decades and decades and lifetimes of people that have been collecting and shoveling information in our faces about that. There's a series of links that I'll put inside the description of this video that we're not going to talk about JFK today. But the reason I bring up JFK is because it is easily, over the course of the last, again, 100 years, it is the thing that people instantly shove into the government had to be involved because it's too murky. There's too many questions. When in reality, if you're able to go and look at all of the information, it's not. It's there, but you have to look.
And you have to be willing to say, I don't know.
Right. You also have to be willing to say, remember what I was talking about when I told you that, you know what it actually was one of the Secret Service agents, when the limo behind him pulled forward, he actually had his finger on the trigger. And that is actually why he's got two different bullet holes in the back of his head. And see, that all sounds cogent. You're like, okay, well, that explains why there's two different sized bullet holes in his head, right? Wrong. It's easy to let me tell you that. And you now have some little inkling in the back of your brain that has shoved this thing into the black hole of I don't know or unreason. And that makes so much sense, doesn't it? And it gets you fired up and goddamn, I got to buy that book. And that's what I'm talking about. We have to fight and resist against, because if you don't, what you instantly do is you start painting with a wide brush and the monolithic impact hits everybody.
Well, I thought that they were going to soon release all of that. So you get your hands on that. We will come back and we'll do the JFK episode.
I'm going to, there's again, the series of videos on the internet that I've found, and it's Professor Sean. I've forgotten Sean's last name. Sean definitively puts knives in every single beating heart of anything you've ever heard in regard to the JFK assassination. And it is definitive. It is complete. And it is absolutely dispassionate. It's just him running through the factoids of what people thought was true and explaining to you why it's not true, not because of some theory that's spun, not because of shoving into the abyss of I don't know or unknowledge or doesn't make sense, but because of the facts that have been gathered and showcased inside of everything that's been collected across so many decades.
What if it's a conspiracy, though?
That's right.
That's right. That's for another episode.
And conspiracies are fun.
Remind me to talk about the appeal to ignorance fallacy as Chris furrows his brow. Anyway.
So I will tie us up here with my final thoughts of this conversation is exactly why I like to refer to myself as the man in the middle. Chief, as you said, different communities, but very similar problems, similar root causes, similar effects, similar.
We have similar objectives, similar goals, similar missions. I mean, we get a lot in common.
I think that's what people seem to forget is we have just as much, if not more, in common than we don't.
Right.
So again, love to hear from our listeners. I, as always, appreciate everyone in this room, everyone listening. And until next time, this is Black and Blue Voices, and we will talk to you later.
Thanks for listening. Want more content? Check us out at blackandbluevoices.com.